let's talk about some things that are very hard for beginners to get down in the gym. There are certain things that are pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy. You get people to do certain things like, hey, here's how you curl a dumbbell or whatever. Simple things like that might seem pretty easy, but there are also certain things in the gym that are very, very hard for beginners to actually get down. And in this video, I'm gonna show you guys a few things that come to my mind when I think about what beginners normally are susceptible to. Now, the worst thing, literally the worst culprit, is gauging RIR, or reps in reserve. And this is something that maybe some people watching don't even know what that is, but if you do know what it is, you might not be using it correctly. So reps in reserve is how many reps you estimate you have left before reaching failure. So if you're doing this set and you're trying to push it, I mean, I'm talking push it to failure, and you're here and it's starting to slow down and it's starting to get hard against your will and you go, and you fight it, you could very easily still have 8 reps in the tank or be 8 reps away from true failure. So what can we do to fix this? How do we know whether or not we're close to failure, and why is it actually important? Well, the main thing is that when you know how far away you are from failure, you'll have a better gauge of how to actually program. So when you're writing your program and you're going, hey, I'm putting 2 sets of bicep curl on this day and I'm not hitting biceps again for another 4 days, those 2 sets of biceps should probably be pretty close to failure because you're not hitting them as frequently and you're not doing that many sets. So if you're doing a whole bunch of sets for something, you can tolerate being a little further away from failure because you're doing more volume. If you're going closer to failure and you're training actually really hard, you're not going to want to do as much volume. And that's kind of the approach that I like for me and my clients, is not to go overboard on the volume, but simply go overboard on the quality and on the actual intensity of the set. So the main thing to look for is that when you're doing, say, any kind of like pec deck or any kind of work like this, is to figure out where your concentric velocity or the speed of the actual positive of your rep is slowing down against your will. So if you watch me do some kind of fly or whatever, we're trying to find a way to prevent the slowing of these reps. So not prevent them, but simply to know when we're slowing. So if, say, you estimate you have 7 reps here and you're on rep 5 and you're fighting with all your will and you're fighting and it's going slow, no matter what you do, you're fighting it, that is going to be a very good indicator that you are very close to failure. So it's all about the concentric velocity or the speed of that concentric rep. I like to stay more in that like 5 to 9 rep range, that lower rep range, because when you do that, you'll be able to gauge these things better. If you're doing a set of calves and you're doing, say you're doing like 25 reps on calves, is rep 23 going to look that different from rep 15? It's harder to say. There's more margin for error there. So the best thing, especially if you're a beginner, work in those heavier rep ranges. Get used to working in that like 5 to 9 range. So that way, when you estimate you have 8 reps and rep 6 moves like, holy shit, this is moving slow. When you're doing something like that, you'll go, hey, rep 6 was probably within 1 or 2 reps close to failure. Eventually, you'll get so good at this that you could like spot, nail, pinpoint. When I'm training with my client at Myth, he's like, I'll look at him, I'll be like, yeah, you got 225 for 7 on hack squat. And he'll go, how the hell do you know that? I'm like, just do it, go ahead. And he'll do it, and rep 7 will literally crawl. It'll take, 5 seconds to get that rep up. I'm like, see, you had nothing left in the tank. He's like, how did you know that? I'm like, just from experience. That's literally what it is. Another major thing, I'm talking like major things so many people don't realize in the gym, is whether or not they're actually recovering properly. And you'll notice, I don't know if I'm looking in the camera, I think here's the camera. Notice if they're recovering properly. So the biggest indicator that you are not able to recover, that you are actually doing sets that you are not capable of recovering from, is that you are not performing better on your next session. So for example, say I was here on this lat pull down last time, and say I was here and I did 200 pounds, right? And I came here and I did 200 pounds, and on my first set, same order, same everything, I got 200 pounds and I got it, and I went pretty close to failure, and my last rep is a grinder. I'm going, barely fight it, okay, got 5, rep 5, done. Okay, we have nothing left in the tank, that's 5 reps. If I come in next time, put it in the same order on my program, make everything look exactly the same. If I come in and I get 5 again, that means I recovered adequately. If I got 6, that means I progressively overloaded or recovered and then had a new ability to complete an extra rep because my muscle grew. Now, it does not mean that if I came in here and I got 4, that I'm not recovering at all. Of course not. There are a lot of outliers. A lot of times you'll come in trying to progress and you're not able to. So don't particularly sweat not progressing on an exercise every time, because that's very normal. You'll reach a point where it might take 2 or 3 sessions to add a rep. I have that with certain things, especially if you're using heavy loads. If you're doing a tricep extension for 30 pounds, you're not going to come in and add 35. And then come in again and do 40 pounds, and then 55 pounds, then 100 pounds. Who do you know that tricep extension is 150 pounds? No one. There's a reason, because there are diminishing returns not only on your training as you get older and have more training age, but there are also diminishing abilities to produce force on your training. We do have a strength limit, so it is going to slow down. The more you train and the more experience you get, it is going to slow down your ability to recover. But the main thing to think about is, again, that you're getting your sleep, you're actually getting your protein in, you're getting around 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein, trying to get at least 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, sleeping very well, and training with volumes that you can recover from. So again, it goes down to the argument, is 2 sets of this lat pull down better than 1? Well, for most people in the course of a week, 2 sets probably would be better than 1. Is 3 sets better than 1? I mean, for most people, it might be a little bit better, but then are 100 sets better than 99? Are you gonna grow more from doing 200 sets than 199 sets and sit in the gym for 7 hours? No, there is that breakthrough point where the volume that you're doing actually starts to work against you. It starts to work against your gains. So finding out where that break point is really important for a lot of people. And I think ballpark for you, if you are not exceeding 15 sets per workout, that is very much on the high end of what I would say is good or acceptable for an upper or lower day. So if you're doing, an upper body workout, I'm falling in the 11 set range a lot of the time, somewhere around there. That ballpark seems to be reasonable. If you're doing 35 sets, you're not being reasonable. I'm sorry. Another thing a lot of people religiously mess up on is whether or not they're losing fat. This is something that pretty much, I think every person I've talked to at some point has sort of estimated wrong, at least most people, because it's so common. So the problem is, you'll have a conversation with someone and you'll say, oh yeah, you get back into the gym, and they go, yeah, but when I got back into the gym, my body just goes on overdrive. I just gained too much muscle too quickly. I just bulk up. I went from 150 to 170 in 2 weeks, just from starting back in the gym, and I gained so much muscle so quick. And it's like, realistically, that is not what's happening. Realistically, you are starting the gym again. You are altering, modifying your eating habits because, got to eat big to get big, right? Like you're training your habits, you're modifying your habits so that you're going back into the gym now. You're putting on a bunch of fat spontaneously, retaining a lot of water, filling up your glycogen stores with carbs. So you're coming back in and you're going, oh my God, I gained all this muscle so quick. You didn't gain all that muscle that quick. You simply are going in and changing your eating habits. So when people say, oh, I'm gaining a bunch of muscle, no, you're actually gaining a lot of fat. So people, I realize, have literally no ability, no idea to know if they're actually gaining muscle, fat, losing muscle, losing fat. They pretty much have no idea. So that's something that when you're working with people, especially if you're like an upcoming coach or whatever, you have to be very careful because people will spontaneously gain a bunch of weight and you go, oh, it's the muscle, it's muscle weight. Like, no, you didn't. You did not gain 9 pounds of muscle in a month. I'm sorry, it's just not possible. Even if you're enhanced, that's unlikely in certain situations. I mean, even if you're enhanced, you're not gaining muscle as fast as a lot of people say they are. So the reality is, being very accurate about this, trying to really hone in on how much you're gaining. For most people, a good rule of thumb to follow is you're probably losing fat slower than you think, and you're probably gaining muscle slower than you think. You're probably eating more calories than you think, and you're probably burning less calories than you think. I just coined that on the fly, but I think that's pretty good. I think most people could benefit from that because everything is harder than it seems. So not to discourage you or anything, but everything is truly a little bit harder than it might seem. The last thing I'll leave you with is not knowing whether or not you are actually progressively overloading. This is something that so many people are completely unable to track because it's actually kind of tough. So if I'm here with this hamstring curl, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'll refresh on this because I think a lot of people will need this. If I'm sitting here, say on this hamstring curl or something, and I'm doing this, and I get 100 pounds for 5, and say I have 1 rep in the tank. If I come in next week and I'm hitting the same hamstring curl again, and I get 100 pounds for 6 with 0 in the tank, is that progressive overload? You can comment what you think, comment yes or no. But the answer is no, it is not progressive overload because I had the same work capacity last week. If every rep was identical and I got 100 for 5 with 1 rep in reserve, I really could have done 6 for 0 in reserve. So if I come in next week and get 6 with 0 in reserve, that's not necessarily progressive overload. The goal is that I come in at some point, I come in next week, whatever, and I get 6 with 1 in the tank because that means my work capacity increased. I have more of an increased ability to produce this work, to actually control this load, do the rep, and I have an extra rep. I'm able to produce an extra rep. So when you're tracking, it's not that this is necessarily a bad thing. This is very normal, right? Like you'll come in next week and you'll gun it a little more and you'll be like, damn, I really want to get that extra rep. So you'll fight for it and you'll get it. But if the rep doesn't look the same, if there is no similarity in the way you're executing it or the amount of reps you had in reserve or whatever, it's not directly progressive overload. Now, I'm not saying to really sweat this or to cry about this because, again, it is very normal. I do it all the time. I'll just say, screw it. I'll do 1 dirtier rep to try to add to my work capacity and do an extra rep. It happens sometimes. It's very, very normal. So it's not something I would worry about or stress about, but just have an understanding so that if you're stagnating brutally on a machine, at least you'll know. If you're brutally stagnating, now you'll have the ability to detect that and to fix it and say, okay, I'm stagnating because I am not, with my reps in reserve and my proximity to failure, I'm simply not progressing. So if you are able to sort of understand that, you will be significantly better off.